Okay, God bless.
Yeah, thank you. Great to be here. Plenty of sacrifices here, those of you who watch football. I expected to see about 2 or 3 people. I'm very surprised. For this reason, I'm going to go on for so long that you're going to miss the whole game. But probably not. I'll keep an eye on the time. Right, so yes, interesting times. I'm going to give you the story of the book, stroke testimony, stroke anything else that comes out during the process that hopefully can help us understand what's actually going on, because that's why the book was written. For me to understand what's going on, let alone you. As I was writing it, I think the Lord was just teaching me, and it's just amazing that this book was only written in 7 days. It was just poured out into me, and probably less than 7 days. And the whole book took 2 months from writing the first word to actually getting it published. So the whole process has been accelerated, I think, because it is a book for this time. And I know it seems like I'm promoting myself, but those that know me know that I don't do much self-promotion. Is that right, Kim and Rosie? Yeah. So I want to take you back to last September, and I mentioned Rosie's name because she's part of this, because something happened to me last September. The Lord really spoke to me in a very strong way. Firstly, through a group of intercessors at a retreat I was going to. They prayed over me and just said the words "new beginnings." And I took that and thought, well, what's that about? I don't know. Let's see how it turns out. Well, 4 days later, I was driving back from a conference or something on the M25. It was a blue sky, and there were very few clouds in the sky. There were 2 clouds that were Hebrew letters, and they actually followed me throughout the whole of the M25, these 2 Hebrew letters. I photographed them. It was an Aleph and a Zayin. I wasn't quite sure of the Zayin, but had it checked out afterwards. And when I got home, I showed it to Monica, and I contacted Rosie, my biblical scholar, and we both agreed it was an Aleph and a Zayin, and numerically they actually mean new beginnings. Exactly the same message I had 4 days earlier. So there were new beginnings coming, and again I didn't know what they were. And then of course October the 7th came, and I have to say that I actually stopped everything I was doing and then asked the Lord, what can I do to help this situation? I could see what was happening, and the world could see what was happening, but the thing that really got me was it was bad enough to see the atrocities, but for me the worst thing was the reaction to the atrocities by the people, like ordinary people, politicians, and even the church. How suddenly Israel became the aggressor even before they'd even retaliated. And we know there were demonstrations in New York actually on the same day as the atrocities, while they were actually happening virtually. So, that really impacted me. I wrote a few articles and they went out on the web, a few places. And I wrote an online facility, which I haven't really promoted. I'll have to mention it at some point. If you can remember these words, The Mirror, THE mirror.church is an online facility I created that actually you go into it basically anywhere in the world. It's free, and it takes you through a path that is right for you to have a complete understanding of what's going on in terms of the history, the theology, and everything else, the culture and whatever. So that's just something that maybe if you ask me later, I'll write it down for you. It's thechurch.church, sorry, the mirror.church. Okay, then nothing much happened. I was just pottering around doing this, that, the other, I can't remember what. And then I got an email a text from a friend, David Jones. David Jones had gone up to the Lake District, and he, like us, he's very much a supporter of Israel, a believer. He went to this place called Ulverston, and a beauty spot just outside on the hill. And what did he find? He found a Palestinian flag. So this is, it's not quite the cover of the book because emotionally I couldn't put Palestinian flag on the cover of my book. So that's the cover of the book with the flag actually sort of behind the pole, so you can't really see it. But for the purposes of startling people at conferences, that's the full Palestinian flag. That's exactly what he saw, and he sent me it. And when I saw that, I knew I had to write something, and a week later the book was written. And there was a sort of a dual thing to this, because Monica, my wife, we needed some work done on our house. She had an architect came round just to sort of have a look around, and what was interesting is that this architect was just your average person, and this is the thrust of my book, is, you know, it's the average person out there that really needs to know the story. There are those on either side that know it and perhaps don't want to do anything about it. There are those that will always hate Israel, that will always be anti-Semitic. But the majority of people in this country, they don't get it, and because it's so complicated, they think they just keep their head down, and we include Christians in this, is that it's too complicated, so let's pretend it hasn't happened. And even if we do something about it, that will make us a target, you know. And this is why I'm so glad to see the Israeli flag outside here. Where I live in the Muslim area. It wasn't 5 years ago, you know. I was brought up in the area. It was a Jewish area. It's Redbridge, totally Jewish area. And in January, we went to Valentine's Park, just down the road. And when we left the park, there were Palestinian flags on every lamppost down Cranbrook Road. And then they were taken down eventually. And the reason for that was because the MP, Wes Streeting, who got in, was one of the few people who did actually challenge Jeremy Corbyn 4 years ago, and became very unpopular among the pro-Palestinian people. So these pro-Palestinian people in our borough decided to try to intimidate him by not only putting flags up everywhere, but actually putting their own candidate forward, this young girl, very well financed by those who finance such things. You know, I saw her literature, it was very, very glossy. And she did knock down his majority. His majority went down from about 5,000 to about 500. So she managed to sway, obviously, the Muslims in the area. But the thing is, on the day, I didn't vote on the day because I had to get up at 5, and I had an interview in Altrincham, Transworld Radio, and I had to get there for lunchtime. But as I drove past our polling booth, there was a Palestinian flag outside. More intimidation. So that's what we're up against, and that's why education is needed. And so other things I did, which sort of came into the story that I wrote, was I went to the very first pro-Palestinian rally. I can't remember when it was. It was in Hyde Park. I decided to go and just observe and keep my head down, basically. And the thing that really struck me, and I think Tony would understand this, was the whole thing was organised by the Marxists, because what they'd done at the beginning of the demo, they'd set up all their booths, Communist Party, Socialist Workers' Party, and all the flags there had their name on it in small letters at the top. It might say Free Palestine or Hate Israel, whatever, but they were sponsoring the whole thing. And even though by the time the thing got going, visibly it looked like the Muslims, as it was, but it was them working behind the scenes. And that is sort of the thrust of what people have to realise, that we are seeing a connection between a godless philosophy and this theocratic Islam, the two that should never go together, and only go together because they have a shared hate. It's the only thing that binds them together is their shared hate. They've got absolutely nothing in common. And as we know, if you're a Marxist living in Palestine, you wouldn't last very long, if you're, of the godless gay type, So anyway, I won't go there, but so I had my eyes opened at the demonstration. There were plenty of what Lenin used to call useful idiots, whole families of white middle-class people with their Palestinian flags and their headscarves and everything. And I guarantee if you engage any of them, there would be no engagement. So, no. And again, they ought to be a target, for us, because these people, they're just following the culture, and they have, because they don't know any better, but they ought to know better because they're educated. And we can go on to talk about the students at universities who don't know any better. They ought to know better because they're educated. They're students at universities, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. So, what else did I see? The usual suspects of the, what's the name of the group? The Neturai Carter. The Jews who hate Israel. Yeah, the super Hasidim who hate Israel. They were there, of course. And then the queers for Palestine. But again, that's addressed in the book. So it's just a crazy business. And then on the other hand, I went to two pro-Israel rallies. One, I met Barbara. Don't you remember? If you remember me, it was outside, opposite the Downing Street. It was just a quiet vigil, which was nice, and it was quiet. It was just Jews and Christians, and they were singing the Hatikvah. It was all wonderful. No chanting, no flags, no banners. And then later on, I went on a march. I think maybe you two went on that as well. A very, very big march all through central London, ending up in the same place. I went on there, and again, everything's so peaceful. And that just shows you the contrast between, that has to mean something. So all that came together during that week when I wrote the book. What I wanted to do is communicate, or enable people to communicate with average people. So I decided to write it as a story, as a fiction. And again, I think the Lord has been working on me. Again, Rosie and Kim know this I've been writing fiction non-stop over the last year. And we've been actually dramatising a lot of them. And God has just given me really skills for dialogue now, which I don't think I had before. And it's just, for such a time as this, because I wrote these dialogues, this couple, so think of a middle-aged couple, okay, a man and a woman. They're just typical people. They've got no axe to grind, they're not Christian, they're not Jewish. They go to Ulverston, they see the flag. So they're taking the place of my friend David, and they look at that flag and they say, what's this? They didn't even know what flag it is. So they had to look in a book to say, oh, it's Palestine. What is Palestine? Thousands of miles away. What's it doing in the Lake District? And it sets them off on a journey of discovery. And the idea is it takes you along with them. And all the questions that they ask and all the people that they meet are the sort of people that you would like to meet, and they'll ask the questions you would like to ask and get the answers as well. So they ask, the first person they ask is just a Muslim friend who basically, all he knows is he hates Israel. He doesn't know why. He doesn't know what is actually driving him, except that he's told to hate Israel. And he says, why don't you come with me to this demonstration? So the man, Derek goes along to a demonstration, an anti-Israel, pro-Palestine demonstration, where he meets a young lady and he asks her questions, what's it all about? And from what she says, he could have been listening to a Marxist speech. And this is the thing, and Tony knows his history better than I do, but a lot of the problems that we have now have come about through, particularly as an Egyptian scholar in the 1950s. He's got a strange name beginning with a Q. And he was the one that stuck together Islam and Marxism and created this revolutionary way of expressing themselves. And out of that came, through the 60s, through the New Left, of which I think Tony was a part of. I won't go into that. A little bit on the fringes maybe. But, the Palestine Liberation Organization came out, and all these liberation movements, they were all Marxist, because even the words that they used and the banners that they used were symbols that come straight out of Marxism. So this is what's happened, and this is what we're seeing the fruits of it now. So people don't realize that the mindset and the evil behind it comes as much from Marxism, the works of Karl Marx, as it does from Islam. And these people, they realised it. So this poor couple, you know, they don't know what they're getting into because they're going deeper and deeper. They meet. Well, I'm in the book 3 times, but it's hidden. So they meet this chap called Podcast Steve, who's actually me, because I do a podcast. So I don't mention my surname. Because we did a podcast about anti-Semitism, and she listened to it, and she thought he'd answer some questions. So she gets to find out, or they both get to find out, this couple, what's really going on. You know, why aren't the moderate Muslims saying anything? Why are people getting away with it? Why are people so duped into celebrating Palestine to the expense of Israel? Why is the word genocide used for Israel, but not used, you know, for anything that the Muslims have been doing, which is genocide in a lot of cases? And they get to learn, you know, as they go deeper and deeper into it. Who else do they meet? This is the interesting one. First, they go to a church, a typical Anglican church. And this is the church that I belong to now. I just realised it. I based it on where the people there just haven't got a clue. You know, they got a poster on their wall for Christian Aid, and that shows you where they're coming from. And they get into conversation with a typical old churchgoer who says, "Yeah, you know, these Israelis, yeah, they're so aggressive. Why are they doing this, that, and the other?" And it was just so ignorant that they walked out. And eventually they came to a fellowship called the Brook Lane Fellowship. I didn't realise it, but I'd actually based it on this. I hadn't been here for many years. There's a whole scene here. Though it's my idealised memory of the place. So in my idealised memory, there was Hebraic dancing, there was, the Israeli flag, there was Jews and Christians all together celebrating. I didn't want it to be seen as a messianic fellowship, because I want people to know that it should be normal for Jews and Christians to be together. You don't have to be in a special place like a messianic fellowship. So a place that was based on this, Brook Lane. So I'm not sure if Tony's read the book, but you might have recognised the place that I mentioned. So they just get their education. They get their education through going to all these places and meeting these sort of people. When they go to an Israel rally, and as they're walking to the rally in peace, they run a gauntlet of crowds of pro-Palestinians chanting their hate, and they note the contrast between the two. They meet people who, on the Israel side, who have an understanding. It's not chanting, it's not rhetoric, it's a true understanding of the history and the reasons. So they're seeing the difference between the two sides, and this might seem like it's a very biased account, and it is in a sense, because I'm biased. but when you read it, it does come across as quite balanced. I try to give. It's very important, not just in my writing or anyone's writing, but in anything we do, is that we should know where the true villains are, and the true villains are not the Palestinians, are not even the gays and the transsexuals. It's those who are leading them, the Palestinian leadership, the Arab leadership, the Muslim leaders that have brought them to this state now, the Hamas, you know, leaders who are sacrificing their own people. You know, when you talk about, you know, I can give you all the words, and I'm sure you know them anyway. You know, we know who the real, when we see, like yesterday, when Israel had intelligence to take out 2 of the top commanders, of course there was going to be collateral damage because the commanders were hiding behind the ordinary people. If they were true soldiers, they would be out there, you know, like John Wayne with all their guns blazing, but instead they were cowering behind their own people. So the 90 or whoever people got killed, totally their own fault. Israel have got a very clear war aim, which is to get the hostages back by any means. And they've said that from day one. They haven't changed. But the world doesn't see that, and every time they see this, it's genocide and whatever. I'm sure you've heard all this anyway. So eventually, the Derek and Dave, and this is where it gets interesting, because this book I've tried to write it for 6 different audiences at the same time, and one of the audiences is someone who does not know the Lord, because what's going to come out is they see what was going on as something that's just so unnatural. The hatred, the anti-Semitism is so unnatural, it cannot be explained by philosophers, by economists, politicians, scientists, whatever. Why not? It's because it's a spiritual battle, and they get to realise it. They don't become believers. That would be a little bit crass. Or suddenly, oh, praise the Lord, yeah, we're believers now. It's not that sort of book. It leaves their story untold. But they're seeing the possibility that there's something going on in ways that we don't understand. And that's how it leaves their story. They see Podcast Steve again, and he's the one that introduces them to the idea that there is a spiritual conflict, and that there's God and there's the devil. And the devil, it's something that hasn't come into their lives, and the possibility that the devil doesn't really exist, he's just a fictional made-up character. But now they're starting to think about these things. And in the final scene of the story, they go back to the hill where they saw the flag, and they've made their own flag up of the Palestinian flag, the Israeli flag, and the British flag. They've stitched them all together and stuck it up. And that's just their sort of gesture. They don't know why they did it. They just felt they had to do something. And then they go home and have a nice hot cup of coffee and go to bed, like all ordinary middle-class people do at the end of the day. Now, that's their story. Now, there's more to it than that, because originally I was going to write 2 books. And the second book was going to be like a companion volume that goes into the theology and the history and the culture. But then I realised that no one's going to buy that book. The people that you'd want to read it won't buy it. They won't pick it up, even if it's given to them. They don't want to see a book that tells them that the whole way of looking at the world is wrong, particularly Christians, particularly ministers and vicars.
I would read it.
You would read it?
Yeah.
Yeah, but you're an exception. Yeah, but you're an exception.
I've been going through this while
Yeah. Well, that's good, and I wish everyone was like you.
It's really, really difficult.
Yeah.
I actually had a dream about, like people being conformed
Okay.
to, so that was kind of scary. And
Yeah.
I'm coming out of it and still ripping it up more.
Well, God's working on you, and I'm hoping through the book.
If I had that book before all this happened,
Yeah.
I would gladly knew
Yeah.
what it was.
Well, the thing that I'm coming to is that all that stuff is now in the first book.
Yeah.
So they've come through the story and hopefully been gripped by the story and warmed to the characters. And then suddenly they say, oh, there's a part 2 here. And the part 2 hits them between the eyes. And particularly... Right. Have you read my book?
No.
Oh, right. Oh, see. She's got a prophetic... She's talking about my book and she hasn't even picked it up yet.
I've lived it.
You've just lived it. Okay. Yeah. Well, the start of the second half of the book is a story that some of you will know, and it goes back, and there's two possible stories. One could be King Frederick II of Prussia, and the other one is King Louis, I think, the 14th of France. It was either one or the other, but one of them, they turned to their closest aid or their doctor, or in the case of King Louis, went to, what's his name, Pasteur? No. Famous Christian philosopher who had his, anyway. Yeah, Pascal. I knew it was something like that, Pascal. And said, in one sentence, give me irrefutable proof of the existence of God. And he says, the Jews, Your Majesty. And that sets off the second half of the book, because that is it. Because even 200 years ago, before all the stuff that we know, before the state of Israel was there, that God had some special hold on the nation of Israel in terms of their preservation, of their achievements, and of the hatred against them. So that makes people think, okay, I might, that sounds interesting. Let's see where this is going. Then I thought, I like to do research by picking on someone not necessarily interviewing them because I can't be bothered to do that, but thank goodness for Twitter, or X as he calls it now, because what I wanted to do at that time when I was writing the book was when the students in Columbia University in New York were just going absolutely crazy. You know, they were on strike, they were occupying some of the grounds, and they were going on hunger strike, all for the Palestinians. And the Jewish students weren't even allowed to walk freely throughout the campus. And this is absolutely unbelievable. So I decided, I found a young lady who was one of them. I found her on Twitter. She was a student at Columbia University, and she was a Christian. I knew that from her profile on Twitter. And I was following her tweets. A lot of them were retweets, so they weren't original. But the gist of it was that she had an absolute hatred for Israel and the Jews, even though she was a Christian. That's what was indoctrinated into her, and it was the words you wouldn't expect a Christian young lady to be using. And because the Palestinians were, you know, the flavour of the day, she was suddenly positive about Muslims and stating things like, did you know, since all this happened, there's been an increase in you know, new Muslims in France, there's been a massive revival in Islam. And she starts quoting from, would you believe it, a Muslim philosopher. You know, not a Christian one, not a Christian theologian, but a Muslim one. And the thing that I thought, I just can't go any further, when she put a picture up and she said, she had a picture of all the leaders of Hamas, and she says, the good guys are winning.
Are you serious?
Yeah, totally serious. Yeah, I can find a name if you like. And that was one example, one sample of the mindset of the students. And, you know, if you want proof of the existence of the devil, then come to Columbia University and talk to the students. Yeah?
My mum's side are Muslims, by the way, and I had to denounce all that rubbish, and there was a lot of black magic in the Muslim religion. And I'm thinking maybe she was manipulated.
They were all manipulated.
Yeah.
And the sad thing is that a lot of it comes from their own professors, you know. And what I say is, it's almost like, I mean, there are times in the Bible when people like the Pharaoh go so far that God clouds his mind, and that their minds have been clouded. They've got so far where God has left them. And what they don't realise is when they leave university and look for jobs, all this stuff is going to be on their record, and no one's going to employ someone who's idiotic enough to do what they did during this period. They don't realise that they're ruining their own future. Oh, I've got two people now. No, Masonic. Oh, hold on a sec. What's that? Who's waving at me? Oh, okay. Interruptions later on. I was like, okay. Is this being recorded? Yeah. Oh, right. So that you probably won't hear them then. Yeah. Okay. Well, you weren't to know. So anyway, so that's what got me started, and then you come to a realization, and it is an obvious one, is that you see these people, and you see all the demonstrations that I've seen and the flags going up, and you realize that there is absolutely no compassion for the Palestinian people. They couldn't care less about them. If they cared less about them, they would be arguing against Hamas. They would be telling Hamas, give the Israelis back, give them back, and people wouldn't be killed anymore. That is true compassion, you know. So there's no compassion, and all it is, it's hatred. So let me read you something, because this is the one page of the book that I just keep coming back to, and I just think God inspired me in a special way on this page 117. If you, so when you see Palestinian flags and pro-Palestinian posters and banners everywhere in high streets, university campuses, and even Lake District beauty spots, it is not what it seems. It is nothing to do with sympathy for the Palestinians, but all to do with hatred for the Jews. It is not love and sympathy for a beleaguered people, but rather disregard and hatred of eternal pariahs in the world's eyes. Every flag, poster and banner may as well say the same thing: we hate Jews, or simply feature a single swastika, black on a white circle with a red background. It could be a Nuremberg rally of the Nazi era, or the flags of the Roman legions as they sacked Jerusalem, or the red-crossed emblems of the Crusaders massacring Jews in their villages on the way to the Holy Land. It's all the same. They all share the same spirit of evil. And that's what we're seeing. It's nothing to do with politics. It's the enemy. But you can't tell people that. But hopefully my book and other ways can at least soften them up. And, you give them the book, they read it, and they have some questions to you. Now, you're not going to soften up those that are so far gone on the other side. It's between them and God, basically. They've basically dug their own graves if they're not willing to change. Of course, prayer can change, and you should be praying for these people. We should be praying for Jeremy Corbyn. I don't know how many people do, but we should be. You couldn't get anyone else with more hatred for the Jewish people, in public life. I go through the history and again emphasize the point that the Palestinians are as much the victims as the Jewish people are. And I'd say something even more controversial, in that those Palestinians who were doing the butchery, there's a sense that they were bred to do that through their education system. They were brought up in such a stifling environment of hatred through their education system and through what they're taught through their family. And why? And we know what happened in 1948, 1947. The British or the United Nations had the partition plan, which gave land to the Jews, land to the Muslims, the Arabs, Palestinians, and the Jews accepted it. And what did the Arabs do? What did their leadership do? They invaded, and we had the war from 1948, and it's been a persistent theme. I haven't got my notes with me, so I can't remember. I think 1980, the Accords there. I think the Camp David thing. The same thing. At one point, the Palestinians were offered just so much, virtually everything they asked for. Yasser Arafat said no, and then the Intifada started. They'd never wanted land. That's the thing. Ignore everything about this two-state solution that I'm afraid our Prime Minister is pushing for. The Palestinians don't want it themselves, or the leadership don't want it. They just want to destroy Israel. And that is not politically correct to say, aloud. And I think they probably know it, but they can't say it in political circles. And, we've had a thing about Keir Starmer. We knew, when I wrote this book, I've got some intercessors that look after me, make sure I actually do the right thing. And we wanted to get this book to Keir Starmer. And what I would have done is gone up and found his house and stuck it through his door and been very direct, and would have been probably thrown out, and the book would never have been read. So what I was advised to do is write a nice letter to his wife, who is Jewish, and which I did, a nice letter which was ignored. But a prayer went along with it. The idea was, write a letter and say, your husband, he's going to be in charge, and history is going to judge him, and there is no more important issue, whether he knows it or not, than this issue of Israel. He will be judged on whether he goes ahead with his plans of looking for a two-state solution, etc. Please read this book and give it to your husband. I didn't send the book. I just said to her, if you want the book, I'll send it to you. We wanted to be polite. Well, she hasn't responded yet. It's not necessarily the end. I also think, now that I've seen it, that David Lammy, who someone told me used to be part of Labour Friends of Israel, has now got this hatred of Israel. I don't know where that came from. He's a foreign secretary. He needs the book, or he needs educating. So we need to be praying for these people. We are in perilous times, the worst possible thing has now happened, which we all knew was going to happen because the Tories made it happen, and we've got a government that is not particularly well inclined towards Israel. So this book, it just carries on, and basically leadership. There's a book that's mentioned. I do a lot of product placement in my own book, and all the products I'm placing there are my own products. so on one chapter I wrote a leaflet for CFI called The Simple Guide to the Middle East Conflict, and that forms one chapter of the book because the lady, Dawn, goes to a book club where they're reading it. Just happened to be reading my pamphlet and also one of my other books. So that's just a way of getting my books in there, but I'm not doing that for any other reason than getting the points across. And the book that I then mentioned and I quote from is a book that I wrote called Zionian, which I have at the back, which gives 14 different ways of hating the Jews, 14 varieties of anti-Semitism, whether it's from United Nations, from activists, from the British government, the media. It goes on and on and on. So we're looking at that, and then you get to realise that even in popular culture, hatred of the Jews affects more people than you realise. And we probably all know the story of the Eurovision Song Contest. Thanks to anti-Semitism, a good thing happened because the juries definitely didn't vote for Israel because for political reasons they couldn't be seen to be supporting the Israeli lady who sang a nice song. But when they put it to the popular vote, suddenly Israel got the second biggest number of votes from the average person in the street. And I'd say that the average person in the street were voting for the Israel entry, not because the song was that brilliant, because they wanted a voice. They wanted to show that that there's a madness going on, and they were on the side of the truth. And it's interesting that when we look at the popular vote, the UK gave top marks, and so did Ireland, the two countries that absolutely, marked them way down. And then the English entry gets nowhere, which is, thank goodness, because it's awful. but that I think showed the world that even something as innocuous as a song contest was affected by anti-Semitism. And then also the election that we just had. I'm going to give you a story, which is it's a bit of a sad one for my son. I hope he never listens to this. I've got my middle son, unfortunately, is not a believer, and we're still working on him. Please pray for him. His name is Simon. He used to be, we brought him up, he used to teach Bible school to kids and all sorts, but he became very much into the left-wing stuff, and he's got a partner, and they're both very much into the left side. So in their borough, which is Waltham Forest, they've always voted Labour, and they've been activists. They've been out canvassing for the Labour Party. Now, the Labour candidate originally was this young Muslim lady, can't remember her name, and on the face of it, she looks the real deal. She is very attractive, which helps, a real activist, helps the community, lived in the community, ticks all the right boxes, but she's a Muslim. And she'd retweeted something anti-Semitic, I don't know how long ago, or done something and got kicked out of the Labour Party, or she wasn't allowed to be a candidate just before the election, like a month before the election. So what does she do? She campaigns by herself as an independent. Now my son, Labour supporter through and through, suddenly becomes her supporter, puts her poster in the window, goes out canvassing for her, because they love her so much. So what happens? She splits the vote of Labour. So my son's campaigning ensured that the Conservatives got in his borough. If he hadn't campaigned, the Labour would have won it easily. But that's anti-Semitism. It's affecting everything. And people have to realise that this ridiculous hatred is one of the major forces in our world at the moment. And the sooner people realise that, and the sooner Christians realise that, the better our church at least will be. So I'll carry on, do a bit about the mystery of the Jews. The great mystery, why was in the 20th century, 25% of all Nobel Prizes were won by Jews. The three most influential men in the 20th century were all Jews, Karl Marx, Sigmund Freud, and Albert Einstein. And it just goes on like that, and a whole list of Jews, including Labour MPs, you know. So, and I think the statistics is 0.26% of the population. You know, if you don't think there's something weird going on, then I don't know where you're coming from. You know, totally out of proportion of you know, a group that's only 0.26% of the world population, you know, to actually have such an effect. So there's something there, you know, and we suggest it is something that's not physical, it's something. And so, you know, I then start bringing in the facts, the biblical facts, and see where it takes them. Don't overdo it too much, mainly Old Testament. And you say, okay, you've got this situation 4,000 years ago. You've got Moses climbs up the mountain, Mount Sinai, and meets with God. And, you know, God speaks, gives the 10 Commandments, and asks all the people standing there, I don't know, you know, 1 million or 2 million or whatever, will you be my people? And they will say, yes. You know, we'll be your kingdom of priests. We'll do everything. You know, and this is where the chosen people concept comes from. God chose them, and they accepted. You know, they didn't read the fine print. We all know what Tevye said in Fiddler on the Roof. You know, please God, choose someone else. You know, this is the thing. The Jews did not choose to be chosen. You know, there's nothing great about being chosen, because what have we been chosen for? You know, it's other people that use this epithet of the chosen people as a put down, you know, but the Jews don't choose to be chosen. But they're chosen because God chose them. Okay, so God has got these people, and he's protecting them and choosing them. And of course we see the whole narrative of the Bible. If we accept that there is an adversary, the devil, if that adversary hates God, then he's going to hate God's people. It's as simple as that. Anti-Semitism is just the devil striking back at God through God's chosen people. And one thing I've seemed to put in all my books is the two great mysteries of history is, why have the Jewish people survived for so long? For 4,000 years. They're the only group that are still intact for 4,000 years. All the others have gone. Jews are still around, and yet they're the most persecuted people ever. How does that work out? It works out because they're protected by one power and they're attacked by a lesser power. It's straightforward. It's another apologetic for God, and it's also an apologetic for the devil. It's the only way to understand anti-Semitism. And it's spelt out in the book. And the book goes further to say, if you are a Christian, then what side are you on? You know, because you don't have a very good track record, you know, you Christians, and you don't have a good one now. You don't have a good, you know, current record either. And I quote something that I've always quoted before from a meeting in 2002 between Jews and Christians, and it was at a time when Ariel Sharon was around, when he went on the temple and caused a lot of trouble. And the Jews wanted to ask the Christian leaders, you know, why aren't you supporting us? What is the problem with us Jews? You know, why are you even having a go at us for the actions of the Israelis? What's going on here? And the people there, the Christians, were very high profile. One was Rowan Williams, I believe. One was Patrick Sukdeo, and there's a couple of others. Andrew White was another one. And then so the Jews asked them the question, and the answer was, the Christians, we just don't like the Jews. They couldn't explain it. It's just that we still don't like it. They weren't speaking personally, but there's still a problem, even after, you know, the fact that everyone's got a Bible, everyone could read Romans 11, everyone could see all the prophecies, can know that it wasn't the Jews that killed Christ. Hasn't made any difference, and that's more proof of a spiritual battle that's going on. So Melanie Phillips wrote about this in The Spectator. You can find it. It's 2002. And why does the church hate the Jews? And of course the church went berserk after that when they said, this is all a lie and all that. And she countered all their arguments and all that. So that's where we are now. So the problem is that the church, so this book has been written for all the other people, but also for Christians who are sitting on the fence. They have to realise you can't sit on the fence on an issue like this with God's chosen people. Otherwise, you are on the wrong side, and God's not going to be happy with you. It's about time you woke up, and that's all of the summary of it. So, just on that meeting, it says the Jews at the meeting were incredulous and aghast. Surely the Christians were exaggerating. Surely the church's dislike of Israel was rooted instead in the settlements, the occupied territories, and Prime Minister Ariel Sharon. But the Christians were adamant. The hostility to Israel within the church is rooted in a dislike of the Jews. That's Melanie Phillips' words. So that's the thrust of the book. The book will confront people on these truths, but it will do it through the back door. It will lure them in through the story and then give them the truths. I think it's the only way it's going to happen. We've all probably been face to face with someone who's so pent up with rage and anger and emotion that you just can't get through to them. And that produces anger and emotion in yourself because you've got this righteous anger. But if a book can be used to soften them up, then that's the purpose of this book. So I think I've said enough now, haven't I? You're getting restless. I think that's probably, was it 45 minutes? Probably. Yep. Well, I don't really have a summary. Did you want questions, or is that going to be difficult?
All things are possible.
Yeah.
Anybody got any questions? Or wanna...
No more questions from you?
I had 2 comments I was going to do, but I don't want it to all be that.
Just see if anyone else has anything. Yeah.